Hello, it's Rufus from Bad Vibes and Natasha, also of Bad Vibes. Hi,
Uh,
Natasha. And you've recently released your Omega Space Station Canteen, which you were publishing in Bad Vibes Monthly, and now it's its own thing.
it is, yeah. It's crazy.
Can you tell us some more about that? What's it about?
So you have, I think, put it lightly, it's sort of stories from when at my old job. I was there for 6 years, customer service. You have things similar like This Is Gonna Hurt from a guy who was a doctor who would talk about old cases and people and situations. So it is basically the same, just a little bit different.
So you're weaving reality into your fiction there.
Pretty much, yeah.
And where is it published?
It's self-published. I done it myself. So at the moment, I published it myself. So at the moment, I've got a few copies in hand, but hopefully, I'd like to get like a proper publisher and really get it going. Just make it a bit more mainstream, I guess.
Hmm. But it's currently available to buy somewhere.
I have the copies. I only have the copies myself. I've given out a few free ones. A couple of people have bought some off me. So that's where I'm at the moment. I released it 3 weeks ago. I got the copies.
Oh, nice. And who's the artist? It's the same fella that you've been working on the whole time, isn't it?
Yeah, no. So back in 2019, obviously I was talking to Lee, who was part of the comic as well. I said to him, "Do you mind if I find somebody else?" Because obviously the girl who was doing the artwork, it was good, but we were trying to make it a free comic, so we couldn't really pay anyone a great deal. So I had a look online because I write a lot of fan fiction myself. I had a look around on the website and I found someone. His tag name is Green Dragon Art, and I was looking at his work and I really liked the look of it. So yeah, about 4 or 5 years ago, we've been talking ever since, and he's really good. He's a really nice guy, and he doesn't charge an extortionate amount of money. Money was never really the issue. It was just getting the stuff done, and yeah, he's brilliant.
Oh, and how do you work with him? Presumably you haven't met him in person.
No, so he lives in Poland. He's quite a way away. We've never talked. We never really talked face to face like through video. We've always just talked through the website, and then we got onto Messenger and Facebook and stuff. That's just how we talk.
And when you work with him, do you send him like a real thorough script detailing each panel, or do you give him a bit more license?
Yeah. So what I do is I send him. I've written out the actual story, and then I'll script it out for him, and then I send him the script, and then just if he's not sure about details, he'll message me. But most of the time, he gets it spot on. It's just like a few little things that he adds onto it, or I change a couple of things, just adding a few little quirks on. Like,
I remember the two, I think it was two, maybe it was three, back when we were at Bad Vibes, and there'd always be something going on in the background.
yeah, well,
Because
that was kind of the idea. It's just to add that bit of humor to it. It's just you're having a look at it, and then you see something in the corner of your eye. It's like, oh right, because on the front cover I have here, there is a fire extinguisher just flying in the corner, completely out of nowhere.
I guess when you're working with space and aliens, you just kind of say space and aliens, and the artist takes that to mean whatever he wants to do, right?
Well, yeah, I went for the whole space thing. I mean, we as a general audience love space. We've got Star Trek, we've got Star Wars, Stargate. We love space. We love the whole concept of it because you can just do whatever you want. And I thought for a space thing, that's you literally have more free reign than you normally would have if you were on Earth or just something like as it would be. But in space, you can just do whatever you want, pretty much. You can add in like these little funny things.
And there's always been that element that you can transpose things that we know and do on Earth and just stick them in space. Like
Yeah.
in some ways, Star Wars is just like classic opera, but in space.
Yeah.
You can always put something in space and make it way more interesting than it was beforehand.
Yeah. Pretty much like a flying like a flying extinguisher. It's like, where on earth did that come from?
So you're going to pursue this in? Are you in contact with any publishers at the moment?
So I have a friend locally. He knows a few people in bookshops and the trading card game shops. So hopefully, it will take off from there. If not, I think I'll just be happy with the fact that I have a physical copy. That's kind of that was the main game. Was to get the physical copy of the comic.
Yeah, in some sense, it's like reaching the end is the achievement in itself.
It was, yeah. Anything else now will just be a bonus.
And I suppose also now you'll have all these scripting credits. Do you think of pursuing, like as a writer, going to anthologies and whatnot?
I'd love to do writing as a full-time career because as full-time, I'm a chef, it's money. Unfortunately, as writing, unless you really get that first jump, then there isn't a lot of money to be made. And unfortunately, we need money to survive. Unfortunately, if it was a case of writing and stuff, all my work, I'd be rich.
Well, yes, and always you go to a publisher, no matter how big and small, the first question is, what have you done before?
Yeah.
Well, now you've got an answer to that, so hopefully the rest should be quite easy.
Like I said, hopefully this is a good stepping stone for the future. I mean,
yeah.
Ultimately, I'd love like a little mini series. I think that might be stretching a little bit, but that would be a fun thing to do because you've got all sorts of mini series nowadays, like Love, Death and Robots on Netflix. That's a very good example because it's just a lot of short stories, different styles, and it's really good. That's something like to think about because I think I looked at, there's about 33 stories I've done altogether, but they're very short. So it'd be a 15-minute long episode with the 2 stories and then just some little bits in between, just to fill it out. Nothing, there's no set storyline. It's just short stories with different endings and whatnot.
Well, the first draft's always the hardest one. So, since you've got them in their current form, changing them for, to fill out 50 minutes or so should be far easier.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you just, I don't know what's a really good example. I don't know. I watched things on YouTube like Watch Mojo and stuff like that. I just don't know anymore. It's just gaming stuff and movies. But yeah, I think I know how I want it to go. It's just writing it all down.
Yes, and yeah, it's pretty hard to predict the market these days, in that all the multimedia seems to be conglomerating together.
Yeah.
Hard to predict where a single writer fits anymore.
That is true. You got all these series on Netflix. They go for one season, you think they're really good, and then they cancel them, and you're thinking, well, where were they going to go from there, and why can't they go further? I think that's the thing. You've got to, and the thing as well, you have people doing these things now on their own, like Facebook Shorts and TikTok. TikTok is a great platform for people to be doing these things, like their little short stories, people giving them stuff to go by. That's where people kind of make it big nowadays, is TikTok, which is not depressing as such, but I think it kind of takes away not the creativity, but just the freedom as well.
It is a curious change today. I mean, as you say, with Netflix, these things get cancelled and whatnot, and it's not always to do with the quality. It's quite often just internal studio politic and whatnot. Things like that you wouldn't usually think about, but if you were in the know, you would. Whereas it seems nice to strip it down to just the creator doing what the creator wants.
Yeah, you got to find that window for that audience, because depending on what you do, you either have a really big window or you have a small one, and then you got to find that audience. Because if you don't have that audience, you basically got nothing. You're just throwing it out there.
Hmm. Yeah, and how do you go about that?
I think finding the audience, you've got to, obviously, most days you have trends, people, I don't know, recently we had the Barbie and the Oppenheimer movie, people went for those trends, like they did like these Barbie videos or stuff like that. They're finding something that's recent. Like short story wise, I done it by accident the other day. I was watching a lot of House MD with Hugh Laurie. It's a very good program. I watched a lot of it during lockdown. And I did a short story for House MD, and it blew up. There was quite a lot of views for it. I was like, surely no one's watching that much of it now. But there was a series recently at the time coming out starring Hugh Laurie. So obviously there was a lot of attention for Hugh Laurie at that time. And so when people go to have a look, they find, oh, Hugh Laurie, House MD. That was like a small window of trending that I just happened upon without even realizing it.
Right, yeah, you didn't do it on purpose. It just happened.
It's definitely not done on purpose. I just released it. Quite a couple of hundred people saw it. And I was like, why is everyone looking at this all of a sudden? Because before that, it was a lot of Lucifer. And Lucifer has been quite popular. I mean, like as a program, whenever I put up a Lucifer short story, immediately there's a lot of views. So that's always quite an easy thing to get an attention for, is to put up something Lucifer related, because it did very well as a program.
Yeah, so it's not like a trend that comes and goes. It's fairly reliable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I write fan fiction, because you got all sorts of programs. Harry Potter, like what I'm wearing. Harry Potter is quite popular in general, so you write anything to do with Harry Potter and people, not everyone, there's a few recent things that have popped up, and not everyone is now a Harry Potter fan, but you still have a good majority of people who do like Harry Potter still. And Doctor Who 60th anniversary coming up, anything to do with short stories, really like relating to Doctor Who, I imagine would do quite well at the moment, because obviously that's out in November. Anything to do with the 10th Doctor like that will do quite well, I can imagine.
Oh yeah, the 10th Doctor is coming back, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, my best friend, who I've known since we were young, does TV stuff in Bristol, and I met up with him for lunch, and I can't believe it. I was so annoyed with myself. I didn't ask, but he was on set when Jodie transitioned to David Tennant.
Oh wow!
It happened. Because they did the filming. She came round the corner and said hi to him. I was like, oh my god, I bet that was amazing. And so obviously he knew way before anybody else, because obviously there was speculation to who was going to take over from Jodie. We knew already, but there was going to be that gap between her and the new guy. So yeah, he knew before everybody else. And I thought to myself, do I want to ask? And would I get an answer? And I thought, no, I want to be surprised. And obviously we all were. We kind of knew he was coming back. He was saying things, but we ultimately knew he was coming back. But still, I thought, maybe he would have told me, but I don't think he would have done. I think there's some sort of contract that you can't tell anyone, no matter who it is.
So they filmed that in Bristol, did they?
I'm not sure they filmed it in Bristol, but his company was the one who did a lot of the tech work for it.
Right, yeah. I was in Cardiff last week. I was an extra on Casualty. And down at the studios in Cardiff, it seems that's where they film a lot of the Doctor Who stuff, because they got sort of props lying around and that kind of thing. I'm sure if I dug around, I would have found the TARDIS somewhere, but you're not supposed to go into other sets.
Yeah, but they did a lot of filming in Bristol, I've been told, and a mate of mine, a head chef at Cozy, was saying that they were doing filming there a couple of weeks ago, obviously reshoots. I was like, why did you not tell me this? I could have run over there and be like, excuse me, I could be an extra, I don't care what I do.
And there's always a good chance that if you just happen to be near the set at the time, you might bump into David Tennant.
I mean, yeah, that would be nice. I mean, if I ever do get my animated series and he just happens to come by and wants to do some lines, I was like, yeah, you do whatever you want. I don't care what you do. You know, I don't know how much money we got for this. Just do what you want to do. Because, you know, the man is very busy. He's pretty much part of a lot of universes now. He's part of, obviously, Doctor Who, Star Wars, Harry Potter. You know, the man is pretty outreached.
What was he in Star Wars?
So he was in the Clone Wars in the animated series.
Oh, was he?
He was a droid who helped the younglings and the young Jedis make their lightsabers, and he's reprised the role in Ahsoka as well.
He's a safe bet, I guess, for studios. He's always popular. You put David Tennant in there, you'll get people watching.
Oh god, yeah, I think that's why they put them back in Doctor Who. Is like, oh, maybe our viewings are low. Oh no, we'll put David back in. They'll go straight up.
Oh, for sure. And Doctor Who is one of those things where everybody has their own Doctor that was like their favorite when they were a kid.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, that's David Tennant.
Yeah, for our generation, obviously, since it's been going back since 2005, that was when they rebooted the series. We had Christopher for one series, and then David took the role for, we gave it up in 2010. So we had it for a good 4 or 5 years, and now obviously he's come back for like the 3 episodes. He's the longest one of our generation. But before that, I think Tom Baker was the Doctor for a lot of people because he did it for 7 years. I think he did it for. He did it for a long time.
Yeah, Tom Baker is the one where you talk to people about Doctor Who, and those are the 2 names that always come up. It's Tennant and Baker. And I mean, for me, it was Eccleston a bit as well. He was my first Doctor.
Well, yeah, he was my first one as well. I remember all the way back in 2005, my family and I were at a camper van site, and whilst Doctor Who was playing, I was out with my parents, you know, just wandering around. They came back, and my nan goes to me, "Oh, we watched Doctor Who. We think you would have liked that." And, you know, she's the reason I got into Doctor Who. You know, most of the time I was at hers watching the episodes. I remember watching with the Slovene in London and the Daleks.
It's hard to think that was all in one series as well, because I guess when you're younger, everything feels longer.
But yeah, no, obviously, because they finished it off with Sylvester McCoy, and that was back in, like 87, 88.
Yeah, that's about right. And then there was the McGann movie in the 90s.
Yeah, 96, I think that was. I personally, I loved the movie. I thought it was a very well-made movie. And obviously we had that gap between McGann and Eccleston, and then we had the anniversary episode that kind of filled in the gap, but there wasn't a lot of context. So you had John Hurt as the War Doctor, so he was the gap between McGann and Eccleston.
I'm only really peripherally aware of what happened after David Tennant because I stopped watching it then, but my brother's been watching it since, and he's always telling me what's going on. I'm like, oh, okay.
No, I watched Smith, I watched Capaldi, I watched Jodie Whittaker's first season. I thought it was brilliant, and then when they came around to the second one, where I think they tried too hard with it. They had like a spy-based episode, and they brought back the Master as a different character, but they announced it in the first episode who he was. And I was sat there like, what led up to that? You could have left that for a good half the season, so I just ignored the rest of the season. I didn't bother. And then I came back for, they had about 5 episodes for like a shorter season with the Flux. I watched that, and then obviously that led up to her changing from Whittaker back to Tennant. That's as far as I got. That's where I'm up to at the moment anyway.
Whatever happened to Torchwood? I remember that was knocking around when I was a kid. I loved that show.
I recently, well, over the last year, I watched it from the beginning again because at the time when it came out, I was a bit younger. My parents wouldn't let me watch it because it was a lot more grittier than Doctor Who. It was a lot more pointed towards the adult audience in general because there was a lot more mature themes going on. You know, there was a lot of killings, there was everything else in between.
Well, the second episode was sex gas, if I remember.
I know, yeah, no, you could tell it came away from Doctor Who a little bit. It's like you never saw any of that with Eccles or anything else. But yeah, they did a few seasons, and then we had a few like shorter seasons. There was ones with the children. You had Capaldi in that one as, I think he was the president. And then you had Days of Earth, where it was the concept of everybody stopped dying. And so there was...
That's right, yeah.
It's a very interesting season. Like, I need to rewatch some of these because obviously being a Whovian and whatnot and loving these things, like, I didn't watch a lot of Torchwood. There was a few episodes that I rewatched. There was one in the second season with... it was a circus act that were ghosts, and they would take the tears from people and it would leave them just basically a husk. There was no water in their body. They kind of took their last breath and that was it. They were kind of in a coma. That freaked me out a little bit. That was a very unnerving episode, but it was a very good one.
It always had that similar monster of the week alien structure that Doctor Who did, but with a bit more freedom to be nasty about it.
Yeah, like I said, there was a lot more mature things in there, and with Doctor Who, you've had obviously the Daleks since. It wasn't. I don't think it was for the first Doctor. I think it might have been for maybe Pertwee, the third Doctor. So I think it went back quite a way. There was like the Daleks, the Cybermen. They're all classic Doctor Who villains. Torchwood, they could just come up with something different and something new because there was nothing to go back on.
Yeah, though they did have a cyber woman, was it?
Cyber woman, yeah. So I think she was an aftermath because technically the Cybermen they weren't from another planet. They were made on Earth. They were created by men in general. So to have the Cybermen in Torchwood was pretty realistic because I think she came from when they had the Doomsday. So we had like David Tennant, Rose Tyler, and obviously the Cybermen and the Daleks clashed, but there were cyber people made in the building. So I think she was like a half-done Cyberman. They didn't completely finish her off because obviously she wandered around in like a silver bikini for like most of the episodes.
Yeah, I remember that. She just looked like a normal woman, but she had like gauntlets and a little thing on her head. My favorite Torchwood was always that one with the cannibals, because there was never anything.
Oh, that was horrific. That was because obviously they weren't aliens. You know, there's not something that's unlikely to happen. These cannibals, they were human.
You spend the whole episode wondering where the monsters and the aliens are going to come in, but it's just a bunch of cannibals.
Humans are the monsters. It's like, great, yay. Someone put real effort into this. that was an unnerving episode because obviously, like you said, there were no aliens. There was nothing out of space. There was nothing paranormal. It literally were people, normal people who you could pass in the street. Oh no, they're cannibals. Great. That's terrific.
X-Files used to pull that a few times. We're always on the lookout for the aliens, but it's just some nut job killing people.
Yeah, I never, considering I love all the sci-fi and whatnot, I've never sat through X-Files. I need to at some point. I've been watching Angel recently on Disney Plus. I never watched any of Angel. I watched some of Buffy, but nothing of Angel. And it's it's an eye opener because some of the acting in it is just like, you can definitely tell when it was made. There's this terrific scene where Angel's getting on a horse, and obviously filming wise might not have been perfect because you pull out and this thing popped out in the corner. It looks like a speedometer next to the horse. It's like, what on the earth is that for? And it was, I looked up on IMDb, and it's the guy with the camera. Pure sight. And it looked like a speedometer next to the horse. I was like, you can definitely tell what era this was made in, and maybe the they had to work with, where you got a guy standing there with the camera in plain view next to the horse. It's like, terrific.
Hey, for that to make the final cut, you've got to have some very bad takes.
Oh yeah, no, you watch. I'm about 3 seasons in, and there's a lot of things that crop up, like a boom pole or like a hand holding something up. You can tell, like, there were some issues going on, but it's still a brilliant series. They went on for what, like 5 seasons, and I'm not sure why they finished. Normally, it's either due to money or like the viewings going down. But
Yeah.
it's on with the comics anyway, so I don't know if it's still going or not. It probably is.
Well, when was Angel around? That was
Angel was.
30 years old.
It makes us feel old, doesn't it? I mean, I was born in 95. I think Buffy started 96. Angel. Well, no, Buffy probably started earlier than that. I think Angel started in 97 and finished 2004 or 2003. It was early on in the 2000s, but they got a lot done. I think it's like 22 episodes per season, 5 seasons. I don't know what the gap was between the seasons. So obviously they it looks like it went on for years, when you could, like, I watched 3 seasons in 2.5 weeks.
There was something with Jessica Alba similar to those knocking around at the same time.
Probably.
She was like a robot or something. She dressed all in black. I can't remember. It was sort of gets lumped in with Buffy and Angel a lot.
Oh, got a thing. We got Buffy. We got Angel. I'm not quite sure what else was going around at the time. It's probably these obscure things that we didn't watch, and they probably did.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of trying to ride the wave, isn't there? People cashing in on similar things.
Well, that's what Angel was. Angel was a spin-off from Buffy, because obviously you had Angel meet up with Buffy quite early on in the season, and then he had his own spin-off, because obviously, you know, as a woman, you looking at Angel and you're like, I can watch that quite happily, day and night. And like back then in the 90s, you had, obviously, Buffy as a character was quite appealing in general to people. You know, she was, a lot of the, like, the physical stuff she did herself, and people like that sort of thing. You know, nerds, people who like that sort of thing. So they obviously with it because they know it's going to do well. Don't know how long they're going to ride it for. Sometimes they do it longer than necessary, but then that's where they get the money from.
How long did it go on? I never watched it myself.
I think, I was looking at it this morning. I was watching an episode. I saw a season 7, but I think there was a good 10 or 12 seasons in it altogether.
Wow.
Yeah.
That did well.
You have maybe like half the amount of seasons where you have the main villain. Like, we had Spike, we had Drusilla. Spike was a nutter, and, you know, he was James Marsden, who played him, was brilliant as Spike, an English vampire who's probably had a few screw loose over like 200-300 years. And then you had I don't know, I think you just had like demons and other sorts of higher entities that took over. I don't know. Or people tend to be the bad guys halfway through. You know, it's no longer monsters you have to deal with. You have to deal with people, your neighbors. That's normally what they end up doing.
12 series, though. It's hard to find an endpoint when you've been going on that long.
Yeah, I think most of the time it got filled out with relationships as well, because obviously, and then like Willow becoming a witch and a lesbian, and then like Buffy moving on from her life because she went from school to college to, I don't know, I never got that far.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So, what are you going to pursue next? Are you going to continue down the comic path, or, as you mentioned, animation and all manner of stuff like that?
At the moment, I'm waiting on some connections to come up. Obviously, a friend of mine's going to talk to a couple of people and see where that goes. You know, hopefully they'll order some more. I mean, the amount I got, so at the time I ordered 25 copies from a publishing site. And when I got the package, they sent 31. I was like, oh, all right, I'll take the 6 extra. So the main idea was to get the physical copy, which I got. And so I gave a couple out. And what I'm going to try and do, hopefully, will get some attention for it. And then maybe, you know, I'd love to go to Comic-Con. That's quite a game there. I've been to Comic-Con quite a few times. I always went as cosplaying. And you meet all these authors, they got their books, they got the comics, and they're nice people to talk to. I talked to quite a few of them. And, you know, it just takes somebody to pick it up and be like, actually, I'm very interested in this. Let's take it further. And I don't know where these people are now, but, you know, it's just a step forward. And then, you know, just go into a few comic book shops, I guess, like Forbidden Planet. You know, quite well known when it comes to comics and manga, so that's a good line to be on with them. And then probably get a second issue out. There's 16 pages, there's a few different stories, and then one of them is just a few things in between, like this one here. So, you know, when you have those group chats at work and have all those little conversations, you take a screenshot of one because you show your mates, are like, yeah, this is what happens at work. I added a couple of those in there just to fill it out a little bit, because I kind of wanted to go for the whole realistic thing, like what you would do at work. And that's kind of what you do. You have your group chats and you talk to people. It's just normal conversations. So that fills it out quite a bit. Like I said, there's about 30 odd stories that I wrote down, and in here I think there's 4 in here, so there's enough for a couple of issues. But I don't want to go too much into it, because obviously there's a lot there to unload. There's a lot of things going on. There's a few, like, I don't know, there's just a lot to do, and it's taken about 4 years to get to this point. But then, you know, there was a lot going on. There was a lot to figure out. And then money-wise as well, you know, we can't just give people that sense of, oh, yeah, we're going to do this comic and we'll get the reward at the end of it. You just can't do that nowadays, because I look on Facebook and there's a lot of people charging, you know, a lot of money for single page covers. And I've been quite thankful that, you know, it's not cost me a lot of money, because, you know, you got to not find a return in it, but at the same time, you don't want to be wasting money on something that's not going to necessarily work.
Yes, and I mean, doing a single page of a comic is far easier from a labor point of view for us as writers than it is for an artist. It can take them a very long time to do a page, and it's very easy for them, well, say easy, but it's easier for them to then sell that skill to someone else. They don't have to take it for free, so that there is always that challenge.
Yeah, I mean, as a writer, I can write a short story within like 10, 20 minutes if I have the right idea. For an artist, it takes a lot longer for them to get it done. You got to color it in. I mean, you can see the details on the front. There's a lot of details in there. There's the color, there's a change of tones. This sort of thing takes a while to do. And so, you know, we might not get paid as writers as much as we'd like to, but we got to appreciate the artist for what they do, because he's a hard worker. You know, I'd message him one day, 2 days later, he's got it done. I'm like, oh, okay. he's very quick, very efficient as an artist, and he's got his own stuff going on as well. So the fact that he can, I'm not asking him to like, there's no deadline. That was the main thing. I didn't want to rush him into like, oh, I need this done within, you know, next week or 2 days, because, you know, people have their own lives as well. You know, I work full time as a chef. He had a full-time job when we first started this. So you can't be rushing people. You got to appreciate your artist, because, you know, without them, unless you can draw, then you're half the story yourself.
Yeah, it's easy to get frustrated as a writer, but you do have to remember that you can do 15 pages in one night very easily.
Yeah, you got to appreciate your artist. I mean, he literally has done a brilliant job, and, you know, the colors and detail and everything. He's done a brilliant job. But yeah, you got to appreciate these people for what they do.
So are you thinking, with the finished product you have, you could probably send out a page here and a page there to go in anthologies wherever, really?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I did think of another one to do up. It was a very funny story. Well, it was a few years ago, obviously, when I was at the job, we had the ice skating rink in Bath. And I'm not, when it comes to gravity, I can just about stand on my own 2 feet. That's as far as it gets. And so we went ice skating, and for the kids, you had like the sledges and the penguins that can go around for kids that aren't that stable. The last time we went, I was given one of those penguins. Half hour, crouched down, just going around the ice rink with the damn penguin. And I think it was like a week later, they had their Facebook group and the girls were talking about it. And the people who run the page said, do you have a picture of this Tasha using the penguin? Because we only have pictures of the children using it. I was like, oh no, please don't tell me you have that picture. I really hope none of them took a picture. I don't think they did. But that, I think, when I get round to it, I'm going to ask him to do him that story. There's not a lot going on. It's just be like me or the person going round like a gravity ice rink, just like, oh, I don't like doing this. Why did I come here? Just socializing is hard work.
I remember going to an ice rink. It's not there anymore. It was just above the O2 in Bristol, downtown.
I went there several times when I was younger. Yeah, I remember it very well.
Over once, and my leg went up in the air with the skate on.
Yeah.
And this kid coming up behind me, kind of in more than 5 or 6, and the blade came about like close to his face. Oh my God, that could have gone bad.
Yeah.
Kid's head in half. Might still be in jail. Thankfully, it didn't happen. Never tried it again.
No, I haven't been since. I don't plan on going again. I don't enjoy it. I find no joy in it. And then the next day, when it came to work, and I tried to sit down, I was like, oh, okay, we're standing for the rest of the day. I was so seized up.
They did used to have ice hockey games down there. I went there a few times.
I think they did, probably, yeah.
I was a friend of mine at the time said, "Oh, let's go and see the ice hockey games." And I had no interest in competitive sports whatsoever. Never have. I said, "I don't care about ice hockey." He said, "But with ice hockey, it's not about the sport. At one point in every ice hockey game, a violent fight will break out between the teams,
Yeah.
and that's why the entire audience goes, is to watch that. And sure enough, it did. It was very entertaining. I went a few more times.
I think that's the thing. Like, we don't. When it comes to sport, I don't have a great interest in sport myself. But most of the time, it is when they fall over. Or those little incidences is what you kind of go for.
A lot of sport is when it goes wrong, it's more natural.
Yeah.
You know, when the game's going as it's supposed to be, there's the ups and the downs of who's scoring what, and that's exciting, I suppose. But really, when it goes terribly, terribly wrong, it feels way more spontaneous.
Yeah, it's more
Especially
entertaining. Because that's what sport is entertainment, isn't it? And people find the actual playing of the sport, the entertainment. We find the entertainment when, not necessarily when stuff goes wrong, but when there's a squabble or there's a fight. That's where the entertainment lies for us.
Yes, I suppose so. It's competitive entertainment. I'm not sure. It's hard to think why people get so excited at the prospect of people from their area being significantly better at an arbitrary game than people of a different area. But for some reason, that hits something in people's psyche, and people go crazy for it.
I think there's always different types of people. Obviously, we're talking about sport. We're the sort of people who wouldn't normally watch sport for that purpose, but then you have people who are fans of their teams for sports. It's just maybe what we're into or what we do as hobbies. It's just not everybody's the same. And I think just how we all kind of communicate with each other. You can go to a pub and you have a majority of people sat there watching the rugby or the football, and then you have the other majority who are around the snooker table who really don't care too much.
Yes, there is that. And with any sport, of course, it's less about exactly what you're doing and more to do with like elements of strategy or physical endurance and things that you would almost use as quality standards of a person, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people use it as socializing as well. You'll have like a group of people sat there drinking and talking about the game and whatnot. My colleagues at work are the same. They talk about like the football deals and players and how the match went, and I'm just standing there like, what am I gonna have for lunch today? Like, absolute no interest at all. I'm just like, you carry on. I'm not really listening to you, and they know I'm not.
I always surprise myself by how competitive I am. When I'm watching two people playing darts, I'm thinking, is it really that important who's better at throwing things of a certain weight from a certain distance at a certain target? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But then if I'm competing with darts, it's like every element of my mind is fixated on destroying the other person.
That's kind of
There's something primal about it.
When it's us, we feel a bit more competitive. Like if you go bowling, you're like, you're watching somebody do it, and compared to how you're doing, you're like, right, okay, we got to get this right, because even though there's nothing at stake morally, to ourselves, we've got to be like, right, we got to do this. We got to kind of prove ourselves. Have that sort of, what's the word? That leadership to ourselves. We got to be like, oh yeah, we know what we're doing. We're gonna just prove ourselves in a way.
Yeah, you don't want to be the runt of the litter amongst all your friends who are bowling. You don't want to be the one who can't do it.
Yeah, because there's obviously you got the one who's really good, you got the middle people, and then you got the one who's absolutely terrible and needs to sides up. You want to be in the middle, but you want to be closer to the better person than you do to the other one. It's nothing to do with how we feel or how other people feel. It's just the way our mind works.
Well, yeah, and I guess there's also the hierarchy involved because in any social group you've got, you have a hierarchy who answers to who
Yeah.
does what for who, but then that could all be turned upside down because the most dominant person in the group might suck at bowling.
It's kind
It's
of,
an opportunity to rub it in their face.
I think that's kind of what you got from school, though, wasn't it? There was always that hierarchy group. You had your different groups of people, and it seems leaving school, nothing has changed. We'd like to think it might have changed a little bit. People are slightly more mature about situations, but at the same time, there's something that hasn't changed. You still got that one person that you think is maybe not better than everyone else, but they seem to have a higher standing than everybody else.
Mm,
There's something
yeah,
that's left
when
up.
it carries more weight than other people.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, they might not be particularly good at snooker or something. So,
But then there's something they wouldn't necessarily show somebody. They show you all the things that they're good at, and then the stuff that they're not good at, they don't show you socially.
yeah, and that's probably how you remain on top.
Yeah, it's by
Disguise your weakness well.
yeah. Like I said, it's funny how these things don't leave us. We think once we leave school, like things will be different, but not everything always tends to be. There's some stuff that does seem to stick around that you don't realize until you actually talk about it. And then you realize actually, the only thing that's missing from here is not necessarily the homework, but maybe it's like what time you end, like when the day begins, when the day ends.
Mm. Well, I mean, we are animals and we're hierarchical animals.
Yeah,
And a lot of what we do is almost in our DNA. We don't have much control over it. And when you're a kid, it's all the more obvious because you don't have a manual override. But just because you can act more civilized when you grow up, that stuff doesn't necessarily go away. Just
yeah.
hide it.
Better time for children. Like the older you get, the more you have to think about things. The responsibilities get bigger, which is obviously something none of us really enjoy doing, but it's just what happens.
Yeah, there isn't a lot to enjoy as you get older.
No, it's true. We just got to find the little positives in our lives. That's kind of how I get through my days at work sometimes, or if I'm having a bad day, I got to think of something positive coming up, and that's kind of how you got to work through it. Like the comic, for example, I was, the time it took from getting the last page done to waiting on the delivery of the box of my comics, I was like, right, I got something to look forward to while sit here in the dentist chair.
But that's definitely a huge component is having a creative outlet in life.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it'd be insane not to have one. For someone who is creative, I think it would drive you crazy if you weren't exercising that.
Oh no, you do have a block sometimes. I mean, I'm an avid reader. I love reading books, so I can go from like a stage of reading to a stage of writing. I don't think I could really do them both at the same time because I gotta be able to think of one thing and not the other. I mean, at the moment I'm reading a Star Wars book as it's Obi-Wan Kenobi book. Just until I've writing a few things at the moment. I got a few stuff done.
Oh, no, sorry, it just started raining here. So
right.
maybe.
Oh, is that what I got to look forward to? The rain. What's going to come today? But yeah, you need to.
We're in the same town, so it's probably going to come your way in a minute.
Oh, but I feel like without reading books, I don't get half as amount of imagination as I do elsewhere. And it's the same with watching TV programs like Buffy and Angel. Watching them, I've written out a few short stories. I don't want to say we rely on TV and films and whatnot, but for the creative mind, we need something to go on, especially with fan fiction. If we don't know something about Harry Potter or Doctor Who, how can we write about it?
Yeah, that's definitely an element. And you sort of take cues from, you know, literary masters as well when you're writing something yourself and you think, I don't really know where this is going.
Yeah.
And then you just read something else for a bit and you go, oh, right, this is where that writer would probably have had the same problem.
Yeah.
And this is what he did.
But yeah, no, I'm a huge horror fan, and I love Stephen King as a writer. I have a lot of his old anthology books, and I wrote a couple of short horror stories myself to put online, and just a couple of them. But I love reading his work, because a lot of the stuff he was going through difficult times in his life, and they are really, truly amazing pieces of work. Because I remember my mum was going on holiday and she says, oh, I don't, like, she wanted to borrow some books, but she didn't want any horror ones. I said, I honestly don't think horror kind of translates from books to like movies as well as they should do. And so I don't own a lot of horror books. I have a few Stephen King books, but the rest of them are like crime and stuff, because they don't always translate so well. Like, if you were to read The Exorcist and watch it, what would you be more scared of? What would scare you more?
Right. I see what you mean. You can't scare in print the same way you scare on screen.
Yeah, I mean,
Jump scare just doesn't work in a book.
no, but then that's what the imagination does for you when you're reading a book. There was short stories that I read. I can't remember the name of it. It was only a little one, and I don't think he's ever brought to TV or film. But there was this man he went to a car boot sale, basically, and he picked out this picture, and it was a picture of a man in a car along a road. And as the day progressed on, the picture changed, like just small things at the start, and then at the end, the car was parked outside the guy's house, the door was open, and the man was no longer in the car. I'm like, great. Like that in like a on screen would probably have been terrifying. But in the book, it was still just as scary, just to like even think about it. And to think, where did he get this idea from? Because ideas have got to come from somewhere. It's the same with Cthulhu, you know, from what's his name? I can't remember off the top of my head. But where did that come from? Where did that idea come from? Because there's no facts to support Cthulhu, and yet you read it, and after all this time, people still talk about Cthulhu, thinking this natural thing, when actually, who's seen it?
Well, yeah, there's something with Lovecraft. A lot of where his horror comes from is always the same genesis, some sort of ancient, unknowable, undescribable vileness of human history worshipped in the depths of time.
Yeah.
You know, it's out there somewhere. And it does make a lot of sense that that was his horror. When you think about the time in which he lived,
Yeah.
there was, you know, the Great Depression, the war was looming, there was political instability, there was all this scientific progress, machination, much like we do have today.
Yeah.
And you think, well, where is it progressing towards? We're always expanding our field of knowledge, but what are we going to find out that we don't want to?
Yeah.
And that's kind of where Cthulhu comes from, I guess. And it's the same place as Frankenstein. It was always that Promethean human knowledge expanding, but to what end kind of thing. Comes up a lot in old horror, not so much anymore.
No, it is amazing there where they get, obviously, Shelley, who has lived in Bath for a long time, when we have a Frankenstein museum here. You gotta appreciate the imaginative creativity that they had to come up with such a thing. You know, we, like 300, 400 years on, we still talk about them. That's how much of an impact they made when it came to writing. Because obviously at the time, people reading stuff, being as superstitious as they probably were, maybe thought that actually that could happen, and it was generally quite scary for them.
Yeah, Frankenstein's an odd one in that, like, the elements of it that got immortalized in the Boris Karloff movie and then mimicked in every movie ever since are not really the important elements of the book.
Yeah.
You know, there's no Igor. The actual creation of the monster is maybe a paragraph.
Yeah.
And these are all of the things that are classically, you know, put big on the screen with thunder and lightning, but really not that important in the Shelley book itself.
No, and it was the same with Dracula as well. You know, that was a very popular, and it still is a popular horror story. But the person it was based on had nothing to do with the actual source. It was just something he added to it. You know, he wasn't a vampire. He wasn't anything like that. He was just maybe an eccentric person. But we still, we don't think that when we think of Dracula.
Yeah. I mean, the Impaler got his reputation for savagery. It's actually quite interesting because he's Romanian Wallachian king. And when the Ottomans were going to invade his land, they sent a small scouting force to begin with. And the Romanians killed them all. And what Vlad the Impaler then did is had all of the defeated army, dead or alive, and also the dead of his own army, impaled. And then he put them all up in a huge field so that when the rest of the Ottoman force came, they thought they were heading into a forest. But as they got closer, it turned out it was all stakes, and it was their impaled scouting force, which freaked them out so much they turned around and went home and didn't bother invading Romania. And I always find that curious because that's where this idea of Vlad as a savage, bloodthirsty man comes from. But really, it's a story about cunningness.
Yeah.
You know, how he was. To put together a trick to defer his foes. Usually how he's remembered now in Romania, but outside, everyone thinks of him as somehow barbaric. But really, just, you know, fought an enemy army, same as everyone else did. It's not that much worse to then skewer them.
No, I mean, compared to maybe what we get up to today, it's not a lighter cause, is it?
Well, yeah, the horrors of war don't necessarily, like, there isn't that much of a hierarchy of how terrible you are.
No.
Strategy is more important than probably shouldn't finish that sentence.
Yeah, gone straight like onto war. Loop back. But yeah, like people who, you know, Bram Stoker, H.P. Lovecraft, you know, we still talk about them today because of, you know, it's starting off the same way. They wrote a manuscript, they wrote a draft, and thinking, oh, I don't know if this is going to go anywhere. And, you know, I'm not saying this is going to be the next big thing, but I'm just saying, you know, this is how they started. And they did a very good job of it.
Yeah. Well, Shelley started sort of on a whim. There's that famous story about her and Percy and Byron coming up with a horror story and came up with sort of a small version of what we now know as Frankenstein.
Yeah.
When she was 19, I think. And they said, no, you should write that down.
Yeah.
And that now everyone knows it.
Yeah. Thinking of Frankenstein as well, I used to have the Doctor Who comics when I was younger, and Doctor Who did touch bases with Frankenstein at one point. They had a very short comic story where, you know, it was David Tennant's 10th Doctor. He just happened to cross like this monster in the garden, and there was Mary Shelley, who just happened to see it and obviously fainted, and saying that's where she got the idea from. I was like, if only that was the case.
It's something similar with Shakespeare, didn't they? In an episode.
Yeah, with David and Martha and the Carrion Knights. That was a brilliant episode. I thought that was a very well made episode. But then, it's like I said, it's the writers. The acting is great, and like the artwork and the characters and the design, but the writing is where it's at. Without story, you have that.
And you can always tell more obviously, especially with Doctor Who, because, the directors are always kind of invisible hands on Doctor Who, but it's always the same cast. So you can tell a good episode from a bad episode, and it's not because of the cast.
Yeah, it's because of the writing.
Yeah.
I've said quite a few times with like the recent seasons, the writing did go downhill a little bit. It's not the same as it was, with old episodes, especially with the David Tennant ones, the amount they put in a 45-minute episode, like the amount that they squashed in, but they still managed to space it out nicely. A lot of the times now it's like two-parters where they can't fit it all in. It's like, well, maybe you should have, a lot of it maybe is spacing out the episodes. You don't need it necessarily because it's not what we're used to. I mean, back in the days of the old seasons, for an episode, you could have 4 parts to it. But I don't think they were long.
There have been some stinkers with Doctor Who, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. I think one of the main ones that first popped up was probably Love and Monsters. It kind of strayed away from the path of what they were doing at the time, because it was the one with I will always remember the name because it was a weird intro to the episode. It was I can't remember his name, but his name was Elton, and he's like going through his life, and he's like, no, not Elton John, because he played a picture of Elton John playing on the piano. That was a strange episode. That was because it took away. It wasn't focused on the Doctor and Rose. It was what goes on when they're not there. So it was an episode, and probably something no one was really expecting.
Oh, that wasn't the one with the Absorbaloff, was it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was a strange episode.
Oh dear. Yeah. But that is something that does work in some cases. I mean, I'm a big Punisher fan, and a lot of the best Punisher stories that Garth Ennis did around the early 2000s, it's mainly about a whole bunch of other people, and Punisher is just this Deus Ex Machina that turns up every now and then to kill off all the characters at the end. It's never really about the Punisher as such. No. But, that doesn't work with... you can do that with the Punisher, not necessarily with Doctor Who.
Yeah, there's sometimes it cannot be based on the title character, and that does work for a lot of things. Because, unless it's out of context, what's likely to happen, how things are going to end, but it doesn't always translate to every series or every program. It's got to be done right, and if they do it once and they didn't think it didn't work, then they won't do it again. But then that's what they do. They trial things out because they know people have watched it enough times. Oh, they'll watch this one, and then they'll really decide on if they want to stick around for more.
And that Absorbaloff as well was a horrible misuse of Mark Warren, who's usually so brilliant.
Yeah,
I reckon he holds something together so easily, but he gets misused. I always, whenever I read Hellblazer, I think he would have been a fantastic Constantine. But instead, they went with Keanu Reeves. How did that happen?
I watched that for the first time a couple of years ago, and I can understand people were probably into it, but I was not. It didn't really do a great deal for me. I'm like I said, I'm more into my horror. Like I'm a major Stephen King and Robert Englund fan. A lot of Robert Englund's less known, probably low production films that didn't do very well do tend to be one of my favourites. One of them was a Tobe Hooper one called Night Terrors. And you can tell it was made on the low budget, but I still love watching it. It's just a weird film.
Well, I mean, the original Texas Chainsaw was low budget, wasn't it? I think that's where Tobe Hooper shines best.
Yeah.
With not much money.
It's the same with Saw. Saw was made on pennies. And look where we're at. We've got a 10th one coming out this month.
Yeah, that's true. You gonna see that?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I go for the gore for that one. I don't go for the story anymore because the story's so convoluted and we keep going forwards and backwards like a damn yo-yo.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, they made a big mistake killing Jigsaw off so early because they had so many films trying to fit him in where he didn't necessarily fit.
But now he's like a DC comic character who just doesn't stay dead. He keeps popping up in places.
Well, there was that one. I think Jigsaw, the one called Jigsaw.
Yeah, Farmhouse and the whatnot. That was a messy film, but it was an all right one. I go based on the kills. And
that one, the traps and the general story didn't particularly do it for me, but I did spend the whole movie scratching my head thinking, this surely isn't Jigsaw, but it is clearly Jigsaw. How has this happened? I thought it was quite clever how they worked him into that.
Yeah, it's when they reveal everything at the end and you're like, oh. Me and my mother watched the Haunting in Venice last night. It's an Agatha Christie story released in 1969 under the Halloween party. And I love films like that, trying to figure out who done it. And obviously it was involving ghosts and paranormal things. And as a writer and as watching Poirot, the man didn't believe in such things. And for very good reason. You know, when it comes to mediums, they get their information elsewhere, like it was in the film. I'm not going to spoil too much in case people want to go watch it, because it's a bloody brilliant film. And, you know, it was it was great. I mean, you try to figure out who done it, but you don't always figure out why they done it. That's what you kind of go for. It's like, why did they do it?
Yeah. How does it compare to the ones with what's his name? David
Suchet.
Yeah.
Kenneth Branagh, who's done 3 of them. I mean, David Suchet did it for about 24 years. So we've done it for a long time. And he plays the character really well. And like they said, she did 30 stories, so there's no end to how many they can do. They just go on like low productions and whatnot. But I love them both. I think they were very good at the role. There was another person who played Poirot, and that was Albert Finney. He did a version of Murder on the Orient Express back in, I think it was late 80s, early 90s. And for me, he didn't really look like Poirot that we know. He didn't really look like Suchet. He didn't look like Kenneth. And he was just an in-between, because I think, as the idea was, Poirot was quite a short man, very like well kept. You know, he's always quite OCD in his own little way. And Albert just didn't really. It was a well-reviewed film, but I didn't really see Poirot in him. It was just a weird film.
Yeah, I'm a bit adverse to Kenneth Branagh personally, and it's only really because most of my experience with him is that Frankenstein movie he did. and he called it Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And he made the movie mostly about him running around with his shirt off, looking sexy.
I remember that one. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
That rubbed me the wrong way. I mean, to do some sort of, when you direct and you act and you have a scene about how sexy you are, immediately you think vanity production. But then to make it Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but it's about me, it really rubbed my rhubarb, as the Joker would say.
I did watch that one a couple of years ago. I don't remember. It was a very gothic sort of movie. It wasn't a bad Frankenstein movie because there's a few ones that are very hit and miss. I mean, Young Frankenstein was a comic take on Frankenstein with Mel Brooks, but I think it's a fantastic movie.
It's possibly the best Frankenstein.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that it's been a horror fan. I've not seen the original.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I have Bride of Frankenstein and I've seen The Return of Frankenstein, but I never saw the original one.
Did you see him when he met Abbott and Costello?
I am aware of that one from Watch Mojo, but I did see a clip of it the other night and it did look quite funny.
And then there's the Hammer ones as well with Christopher Lee as the monster.
Yeah, Hammer horror films I think are terrific movies. I don't want to sound cheesy, but they don't make them like those anymore. You know,
No.
low CGI, low productions, but they did the job and they did it very well.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, they picked up where Universal left off in a way.
Yeah.
When it became illegal for Universal to make good movies.
I did watch the original Wolfman, and that was a very good film.
Yeah.
And what they worked with, that was a terrific film. And The Invisible Man as well. I watched a lot of Dead Meat kill counts with James A. Janice, and he did that, and he goes through like the behind the scenes of The Invisible Man, and the way that they made obviously the character look invisible when he took off all of his bandages was terrific, because he didn't have the sort of technology we do now. So to see it back then, you know, in the 40s and the 30s, it's terrific.
Yeah, there's so much ingenuity in the practical effect.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much in the Wolfman. It looks okay.
Yeah. The Invisible Man is where the practical effects really did shine for that movie. It was a terrific movie. The ending was a bit like, I think there's like a train crash and like, I don't know where that came from. And obviously you got your model railway, you know, it's not real, but it's just what they could afford at the time. That was a terrific film. That was one where like practical effects really did make their mark back then. And it was the same with when they released the original Phantom of the Opera. You know, you hear the tales of people watching that in the cinema and fainting at the sight of his face, when nowadays if somebody faints in the cinema, it's probably because, you know, of some other ailment.
Yeah. Was Phantom of the Opera the one where the fella had the wires, he wore wires in his mouth to keep it in like a rip? No, that was The Man Who Laughs, I think.
Oh, The Man Who Laughs. I'm aware of the movie and I've not seen it. I think they based that character a lot on the Joker for Batman.
The other way around, yeah.
Yeah. But like watching some of the clips from it, you'd be damn terrified of that face.
Yeah, and he got it by putting a big metal frame in his mouth and keeping it there for several days, so that when he took it out, he genuinely did have his horrible smile. Conrad Veidt, I think it was.
Back in the days of silent movies, and you know where, you know, you could probably get away with it without having to do a lot of communication, because you can imagine trying to talk to someone with a great big metal frame in your mouth is going to be a bit dodgy.
Well, yeah. A lot of that silent movie stuff as well comes from just movies being fairly recent, and actors and directors are used to the stage.
Yeah.
So that sort of getting up close and in the actor's face that we take for granted now was a new thing. They were still thinking about, we've got to make it big so the people at the back can see. But it comes off brilliantly, especially in like the Germans. They did it great with Dr.
Nosferatu.
Caligari, Nosferatu. Yeah, amazing stuff.
I watched the original, well, it was the original as you can get it of Nosferatu, and it was a terrific film that they made at the time as well. You know, you got to think back then of what they had to work with, what they came out with. You still talk about now. So you can tell.
Yeah, and when a movie is that old, you watch it sort of from a critical, almost historical perspective. You're not expecting an old horror movie to scare you, but there's a few points in Nosferatu where you get a bit unnerved for sure. I think when old, I forget what the Jonathan Harker character is called, but when he's trying to sleep at night and he opens his door and looks down the corridor and Count Orlok's just standing there,
Oh
like
god.
he's been stood there all night just watching the door.
There was a terrific film I watched. I don't think it was necessarily a horror film, but it was a horror film in general. I can't remember the name of it. But the cover of it was like this woman in her hair, like she's terrified. And the story was these people end up in this abandoned, like this old house because they're caught in a storm. And the owners of the house are constantly talking about this creature that's locked up in the attic. You know, they don't let him out. And obviously near the end, he gets let out, and you're ready to see this like scary person, this creature, whatever. And it's just an old man. And you're like, all that tension worked up just to see some frail old man walk down the stairs. And obviously then it turns out he's a bit screwed up in the head, but it was still a brilliant movie, and it really did freak me out a little bit, just the way they were talking and the way it was shot. It was a brilliant movie.
Something like building up tension, if you can do it well, it's timeless. It doesn't age like special effects do, like jump scares do.
There was no special effects, there was no CGI involved, it was just pure just filming. There was no special things in there was no CGI. And that's kind of what I miss sometimes when I'm watching a movie. You know, you got these heavily CGI films. They don't look always so bad as the rest of them, but at the same time, it's not as good. You can tell when something is practical, when something is CGI.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of the reason for that is computer technology changes and develops so quickly that it means the old stuff ages quicker.
Yeah.
You see CGI 10 years ago, and it doesn't look as good as it did when you saw it the first time. You know, you're not as tricked, because a good practical effect is designed to trick the naked eye.
Yeah.
And that's always going to be the same threshold. But, you know, a computer effect, it has to trick what your relative perception of computer effects are at the time you're doing it. But in 5 years' time, it's going to look way better, and you're going to be able to spot the falsehoods in an old one.
You can also always going to tell when the movie was made based on these effects nowadays.
Yeah. Well, you know, every now and then you see an old movie and think, wow, that's a computer effect, but it still looks pretty good today.
Yeah, I think there's a few good ones that were made in the 80s and the 90s that would still hold up really well today, and then there's some that really wouldn't.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what the old John Carpenter and David Cronenberg, a lot of his practical effects still look fantastic.
Yeah. I watched the Beyond the other day, Cronenberg one. You can tell what's his because he goes for like the same sort of like the dodgy creatures and whatnot. You can tell they're his. But I watched the Beyond the other day, and that's a nasty film, but it's so good even today. Like the standards are like very high for it.
Yeah, in the whole exploding head trick in Scanners and
oh, that's a brilliant that's a brilliant piece of cinematic history. That whole blowing up the head. I remember that film. That was a good film, but it's just the way they did it. Like nowadays, I like gory films purely because of the effects. Because
Yeah,
they put a lot of the effects into that than they do the rest of the film.
especially in slashers. I mean, with horror, it's almost like the people who go to horror movies will notice and dislike a computer effect right off the bat. So
Yeah,
you have to keep up a high standard of practical effects, even though every other genre on the planet is happy to just get some CGI guys in.
yeah. It's the same with Saw, to be honest. Saw started off as it's always been quite a practical film.
Mm.
There's not a lot of CGI going on, but then that's kind of why they keep making the films, I imagine, is people keep wanting that gore effect. Like the trailer for the new 110 is the one with the eye trap. I don't know what's going to go on in that, but I'm really not looking forward to it because that looks unnerving.
Yeah, I've only seen the posters, but a guy with light bulbs on his eyeballs, like, yeah, I'll definitely watch that.
Yeah,
Probably horrible.
yeah. There's some gore nowadays that we want to watch it, but at the same time, it's sometimes the noises that goes along with it. We're like, no, never mind.
Yes, yeah. I know I'm a big fan of the Halloween movies.
Mm,
I think it's probably that and Saw are the only like huge slasher franchises that I followed all of them. And I really liked, even though the movies themselves weren't, they were definitely flawed, but the last few Halloweens, the practical effects have been brilliant.
yeah,
When it could have been so false. You know, it's just a fella gets stabbed in the eyeball, and you're left thinking, how did you get a stab in the eyeball without having a disappearing computer knife? But they just put a prop knife already in the guy's eye
yeah.
and took it out, and then just played the footage backwards, so it looks like he's shoving it in.
It's very clever what they do. I watched a new Hellraiser the other day, and
There's a new one.
yeah, they released it last year on Hulu.
Oh yeah, that's
I need to rewatch it again, like when I'm a bit more awake.
a,
Remember the first one? The first one was brilliant because they had the scene where Frank is coming up through the floorboards and you've got all the muscles and the bones, and
yeah.
it's generally disgusting to watch. It's another Cronenberg, but it's a bloody oh no, it's a Hooper, I think. But it's a bloody great scene of how they managed it. It's a lot of the stuff they filmed it and then they did it backwards, but it's still nasty as hell to watch.
It was Clive Barker, I
Oh yeah,
believe.
Barker, yeah, Clive Barker, yeah.
He was a novelist, and they made a movie out of something he wrote, and he didn't like it. So when the studio said we want to do Hellraiser, he said only on the condition that I get to direct it myself,
Yeah.
because the last one sucked. And then he did, and it's Hellraiser. Everyone loves it. But yeah, that whole heart beating in the floorboards.
Oh, God, it was horrible. My brother wanted him watching it, and he was like, ugh. I'm like, yeah. I will never get tired of watching this scene, but it is nasty to watch.
But then you get the second one, which is a good movie, but
Yeah.
when you see it the second time round, you realize that it is actually completely plotless.
Yeah.
It is all an excuse for practical set pieces.
Yeah.
Definitely delivers on it with that big doctor with all the hooks in him at the end.
And the mattress thing with Julia is or that's a good case of practical effects done right because that looks disgusting.
Yeah. Well, there were computer effects in that too, and to be honest, they look pretty good. When God is a giant cube in the sky or something, I don't really remember, but it looked nice.
Yeah.
And I'd hate to think that hell is just a big labyrinth with hooks and flying cubes, but it might be.
Maybe. I went to Comic-Con in it was Cardiff, and I went around the first stalls, and the guy had the puzzle cube from Hellraiser.
Oh,
And
sweet.
do you want to hold it? No thanks. I'm alright. I don't want to touch that thing. You know it's fake, but at the same time you're like, I'm good. I'm really good.
I think it's okay so long as you don't solve it.
Yeah.
That's when your troubles start.
But I remember looking at it and I was like, nah, keep hold of it.
That movie did for Rubik's cubes what Jaws did to sharks.
I'm that really terrible person who didn't enjoy Jaws. I think I need to watch it again these so many years on, but I just didn't enjoy it. I think it's the damn inflatable shark that put me off.
But it's only present, like it's not there on screen so long that you really notice.
No, it's why
But if you're looking for it, you'll definitely be disappointed. But
yeah.
so the trick is not to look too hard at the shark.
Yeah. Because I feel like I can tell when this was made.
But it was a bad prop for the time. It's not like it's aged badly. It was always bad. That's why they underused it so much.
But as a movie tying in with the book, it is a staple piece in horror history.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, a lot of the reason people prefer the movie to the book is the same reason I prefer the book to the movie.
Yeah.
It's so cynical and unpleasant, and all the people are detestable.
Yeah.
People think the movie has more humanity that you can associate with the people more, but I prefer hating everybody.
Yeah. Everyone wants to keep the beach open for profit. I was like, fine, you're in nobody's good books. No one's going to care if you get eaten up by the shark, mate. No one's going to sit here. Now I got the rain.
Ah, I haven't.
Bopping over. That time, swap sides.
Well, where can viewers find you and keep up to date on all of your recent and upcoming works and whatnot?
I think DeviantArt is a good spot for me. I spend a lot of my time on there. I remember my passwords, so that's always helpful for that. TikTok, I'm on there a little bit as well. I think I'm gonna start posting a bit more. Maybe not sometimes on Facebook, but like DeviantArt and TikTok are probably going to be the best bets because I spend a bit more time on there than I do elsewhere. And hopefully, I'll get a few more, I'll have a few more pages done sooner rather than later because there's a lot that I want to do and there's a lot of scripts that I found that haven't been done yet. But hopefully, there'll be a few more pictures of the characters coming out because there's a lot of them. There's a good lineup going on. But yeah, so TikTok, DeviantArt, are where my spaces are.
Great. Well, be sure to check those out. And where can they currently buy it, if they can?
You can't currently get it at the moment, but obviously if anything does crop up, then I will update on TikTok. And there are a few copies left over. I don't know how many after a couple of days, but hopefully I will be printing out more within the next couple of months or so.
Nice.
So yeah, it'd be best to, if you can, get in touch with me, and then I can send you out a copy, signed, got the issue number on there because they didn't put them on the comic, so they're going to be hand drawn numbers on the comic.
Collector's editions.
Yeah, my dad got the #1 issue, got it framed. There was a lot of people fighting for that #1 issue. I was like, yeah, you're not having it. unless you want to pay me for it. It's definitely taken.
Well, yeah, you could have written number 1 on multiple copies.
Couldn't I? I don't know how well they would have sold in the future. It's like, why is there so many copies with the number 1 issue on it? I was like, yeah, that didn't work out very well.
You're gonna have the Image Comics implosion all over again.
It's like, why does everyone say number 1? It's like Illuminati problems.
Well, no, they'd be testing them, trying to find out which one's the forgeries.
They'll have to like send me emails saying, "Is this the number 1? Is the proper number 1? No. Is that number 2? No. That's more like 202."
Well, that's all for this interview, I think. So tune in next time, guys, for whoever the mystery guest is.
Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Take care, my friend.